Welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we're going to be teaching you how to play Tapestry from Stonemaier Games. Now this is a civ building game or a civilization game where you're starting from early on, going all the way into the future really with space travel and stuff like that. A little bit abstracted, but so much fun. I have just really enjoyed this game. It actually made my top 9 best solo games this year, so be sure to check that list out. There'll be a link here in the video so you can see that list if you haven't seen it yet. Now I do also want to mention my sponsor, Board Game Co. This is a website where you can buy, sell, and trade games. They have a great selection to buy from with really good prices. They have they will, you can sell games to them as well, and you can trade games over there. And that's really the feature that I like the most, that I think is the coolest idea, is the trade feature. They link right into your Board Game Geek account. They can see what games you want, what games they have that you want, what games you have that they want, all that kind of stuff. So be sure to check out Board Game Co. Click on the link in the description below so that they know that I sent you. Okay, so let's get right down to the table. I'm going to show you how to play Tapestry. In Tapestry, players will advance on 4 advancement tracks to earn progressively better benefits: the exploration track, the science track, the military track, and the technology track. Along the way, players will also improve their income, build their city capital, leverage their unique ability, earn victory points, and gain tapestry cards, which tell the story of their civilization. To begin setup, players use the larger map for 4 or more players, and the smaller map for 1 to 3 players. Players then shuffle the technology deck and place it right here next to this symbol, and then reveal 3 technology cards in the appropriate spaces. Players shuffle the tapestry cards and place them face down in a deck right here. Players shuffle the territory cards and place them face down in multiple stacks near the board. There are actually way more territory cards in the game than this, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to keep a small number of them nearby. The same is done for the space tiles. Players place the landmark miniatures on this board. These landmarks are all associated with the advancement tracks on the main game board. The additional landmarks are placed near the technology track since they can be obtained through certain technology cards. The green science die is placed near the science track. The red and black conquer dice are placed near the military track. Each player is given a capital city mat. In a game with less than 4 players, the capital cities are first split up into the groupings found on the board: 3 and 5, 2 and 4, 1 and 6, and then those pairs are passed out to the players randomly, and then the players choose one of the ones that they are given, discarding the other. Once a capital city is chosen, the player will place 2 outposts on their indicated territory. Next, players should see their resource track with 5 of the corresponding buildings: markets, houses, armories, and farms. As you can see, the far left space of each row will remain exposed. Players will gain a token for each resource type in the game: workers, coin, food, and culture. Each of these is placed on the 0 space of the resource tracker. Each player is then dealt 2 random civilizations and chooses which of the 2 they wish to keep. The other is discarded, and all unused civilization mats are shuffled into a deck kept nearby. Players should also make sure to follow any setup rules specific to their civilization listed on the civilization card. Next, a player's player area should have their civilization next to the resource track, which in turn is next to their capital city. Be sure to leave room to the right of the capital city for any technology cards the player will gain. Finally, players place one player token on each of the 4 advancement track starting spaces. And one player token on the 0 space of the victory point track. At this point, the first player should be randomly chosen, and then gameplay will begin with an initial income turn. On a player's turn, they may either collect income to advance into the next era, or advance on an advancement track by paying the indicated cost. Play will always proceed clockwise from player to player. When a player uses their turn to collect income, they are beginning a new era for their civilization. The very first thing each player will do during a game is an income turn, but other than that, each player likely will take income turns at different times. To complete an income turn, players will follow some or all of the following steps in order. Which of the steps is completed is determined by the income turn the players are on. If a player can't remember which steps to follow, their income mat lists not only the steps found here, but also which turn each step applies to. As you can see, right next to each step, the turn number is listed. So this Activate Civilization Abilities step would be used in turns 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm now going to explain each of the income turn steps as if we were on a turn where the player would use that step. The first step is Activate Civilization Abilities. If the player were playing the Militants, for example, their ability states that they will gain each of these exposed benefits at the beginning of the income turn. So in this case, the player would gain 1 coin, found here, 1 worker, found here, and then also add 4 victory points on the victory point track. The next step of the income turn is to play a Tapestry card from the player's hand. The player will look at what Tapestry cards they have, choose one, and place it in the leftmost empty Tapestry card space. If the player has no Tapestry cards, then instead they will draw the top one from the deck and place it face down in that space. Also, take note of these benefits. If the player is the first one to place a Tapestry card in that particular era, they'll gain the listed benefits. So in this case, 1 resource of any kind. If the Tapestry card has a This Era ability, it applies from now until the beginning of the player's next income turn. If, on the other hand, the Tapestry card has a When Played ability, then it is resolved immediately. Keep in mind that you must play a Tapestry card from your hand. So if you have one in your hand and you don't want to play it as a Tapestry card and it's the only one you have, you still must use it. Next, this arrow indicates the player must upgrade a technology card if possible. So in this case, the player would upgrade nails to their 2nd tier. We'll discuss exactly what happens when technology is upgraded a little bit later in this video. Next, this symbol means the player will gain victory points from all exposed victory point icons on their income mat tracks. In this case, there's a victory point icon here and one here. This symbol means the players will gain 1 victory point for each technology card currently next to their income mat. This symbol means the player will gain 1 victory point for each completed row and column in their capital city, which we'll discuss a bit more later. This symbol indicates the player will gain victory points based on the uncovered victory point numbers, such as this one, in this case 4 victory points. And this symbol means the player will gain 1 victory point for each territory they currently control on the main map. And finally, the player gains income for all exposed icon resources, territory tiles, and tapestry cards on the resource tracks. So for instance, with this initial starting setup, players will gain 1 coin, 1 worker, 1 food, 1 culture, but then also 1 territory tile, like this, and 1 tapestry card, like this. Most turns in Tapestry will be used to advance on an advancement track. To do this, players resolve the following steps in order. First, the player must pay the cost which is listed under the tier of the selected track. So Tier 1, to move into Scouting, will cost 1 resource of any kind. So perhaps the player pays 1 coin. Next, the player moves their player token 1 space forward and gains the listed benefit. In this case, the benefit is 2 exploration tiles. Some track locations, such as rafts, have a bonus in this gray box. If a bonus is available in the player's new space, the player may pay the indicated cost to gain the bonus. So let's say on the player's next turn, they wanted to gain rafts. They would pay the cost, and let's say they use one worker to cover that cost, advance into that space, gain this benefit, which is exploration, and we'll cover that a little bit more later. And then if they wish to, they could gain this bonus by paying an additional resource, maybe food this time, and drawing a tapestry card. A regular benefit must be gained if possible when the player advances into the space. Paying for and then gaining a bonus is always optional. Each advancement track is divided into 4 tiers. Each tier is increasingly beneficial, but also increasingly expensive. As we said, this is one of any resource. This tier is 1 food and 1 resource. This tier is 1 food and 2 resources. And this tier is 2 food. The first player to advance into a new tier by any means at all will gain the landmark listed. In this case, the lighthouse. The player then places that landmark on their capital city. So now let's go over some of the symbols players will encounter while advancing on the 4 tracks. This symbol is Explore. The player first selects 1 territory tile from their supply. Let's say this one, for instance, and then places it on an unexplored hex adjacent to a territory they already control. They may orient it in any direction. Next, the player gains 1 victory point for each side of the territory with at least 1 aligned terrain. Since the tiles have 6 sides, the max victory points from this will be 6. In this case, there's forest aligned here and water aligned here, so 2 victory points is what the player would get for this tile. All the tiles have this small river around it. That should be ignored for the purposes of scoring and is just for aesthetics. Finally, the player will gain the benefit shown on the tile. When the player reaches tier 4 of the exploration track, she will venture beyond Earth. Space tiles offer more powerful benefits than regular territory tiles. When the player explores a space tile, the tile should be placed near their income mat. The player then gains the listed benefit, and if another space tile is gained, it also is placed nearby. Space tiles do not align. Players should also realize that there are a limited number of space tiles, and if they run out, that's it. While we're discussing space tiles, it should be noted that this space tile should in fact have a conquer symbol on this red hex, and it doesn't. So this symbol means nothing as far as the game is concerned. Just remember that there should be a black conquer outpost on top of it. These symbols are the research symbol. Anytime a player gains this benefit, they first roll the research die. After rolling the die, the player then advances on the corresponding advancement track for free if they wish, in this case, military. Advancing because of this die is not mandatory, and the player may choose to not advance after seeing the result of the die roll. If the player is the first to advance to a new tier, they still gain the landmark as normal. If the die roll would push a player off an advancement track because they are already at the end, nothing happens. Research icons with this X symbol mean that the player does not gain the benefit or bonus from the new space. They simply advance into it. However, if it does not have the X, as you see here, not only does the player advance into the next space, but they also gain the benefit. After gaining the benefit, the player may also pay for the bonus as normal. Similar to the research die, players will also find these symbols throughout the game, which allow the player to advance on that specific track. When the player gains one of these symbols, if there is no X, as you see here, then not only do they advance, but they also gain the benefit and may pay for the bonus, just like with the science die. This is the invent symbol. This is the invent symbol. When a player gains invent as a benefit, first they select a tech card from one of the face-up tech cards found here, or draw a random one from the top of the deck. If the player does choose a face-up tech card, it is immediately replaced. If this deck is ever empty, when a space needs to be filled, the discard pile will be shuffled into a new deck, and then the space will be replenished. After the player chooses their tech card, they then place it to the right of their capital city. next to this X space. There is no limit to the number of tech cards that can be in each row, and no immediate benefit is provided when the tech card is initially gained. Tech cards only provide benefits when upgraded, and the upgrade symbol looks like this. To upgrade, select one tech card in either the bottom or middle row. That card is then shifted one row upwards. Any card in the top row may not be upgraded. When a card is upgraded, it gains the benefit located in the symbol of the row it just moved into. So in this case, upgrading the bakery to this middle row gained that player 4 victory points. And if the bakery was upgraded to the top row, the player would gain that landmark. Anytime a player wants to upgrade to the top row, they must first meet the prerequisite listed beneath that benefit on the tech card. If the player has not met that prerequisite, then one of the player's neighbors must have already met that prerequisite. If neither the player or the player's neighbors have met the prerequisite, then the player may not upgrade that tech card to the top row yet. So for instance, the bakery top upgrade requires farming to have been revealed, which means that this farm would have to have been placed in a capital city, which reveals farming here. This is the conquer symbol. As a reminder of something we spoke about earlier in the video, this is the symbol that should have been here on this space tile. So keep that in mind whenever you play this space tile during the game. When a player gains this benefit, first they place an outpost from the supply onto a territory that has no more than 1 token on it and is adjacent to a territory they control. A player controls a territory if their outpost is the only upright outpost on that territory. So for instance, the gray player controls this territory and this territory. However, the red player controls this one, even though the gray player does have an outpost on that territory. After placing the outpost in the conquered territory, the player then rolls the conquer dice. The player is then allowed to choose one of the 2 shown benefits. In this case, 5 victory points or 1 coin resource. The red die includes this symbol, which means 1 victory point for each controlled territory. So in this case, 2 victory points. And the black die has this symbol, which indicates the player gains the benefit of the tile they just conquered. So if this is the tile they just conquered, there is no benefit for using this die, and so they obviously would want to use the red die instead for the benefit. However, if this were the tile that the player just conquered, this symbol would give them 1 coin resource. If the player conquers an opponent's territory, they should topple the opponent's outpost. Now that there are 2 tokens on the territory, it may never be conquered again. Keep in mind, if there are 2 outposts on a tile, that tile is immune from future conquering. An opponent may prevent their territory from being conquered, however, by playing a trap card. Trap cards are disguised as tapestry cards. But if the opponent discards one from their hand when they are being conquered, they will retain control of their territory, and instead the player who attempted the conquering will have a toppled outpost in that territory. However, the player who initiated the conquering still will gain the benefit of the conquer dice. Players may make deals with other players, such as, if you don't conquer me, I won't conquer you, but they may not exchange anything tangible. Also, once all of a player's outposts are on the map, they may not conquer anymore. Buildings are permanently placed when placed in the capital city. And they have 2 different purposes. If a player completes an entire 3x3 district, then that player will gain any 1 resource they wish. These orange dots are considered already filled, so by placing a building here, that district is now completed, and the player has gained 1 resource of their choice. Also, players attempt to complete rows and columns in order to gain victory points. So here we have this row, which has all of these spaces filled. So by placing that building there, players will now gain victory points during the income phase for that column. Any open spot in the capital is always available for a building, as long as it does not go in any of these impassable areas. When a player gains a farm, house, market, or armory, any of the income buildings, they pick the leftmost building from that section and then place it anywhere they wish in their capital city. Landmarks show which civilization is the first to advance to a new tier on an advancement track or the first to invent something. Each landmark is a specific building miniature with a unique shape that the player places in their capital city. There is exactly one of each landmark, so even if a player found a way to gain one that had already been gained, they will not be able to. Also, it should be noted that a player may gain and place buildings even if they extend outside of their city grid. So a player could do this in order to complete this grid here. However, a player may never place a building over an orange dot like you see there. Let's discuss a few other important notes that players should keep in mind. It is possible to gain additional civilizations through various effects, and if this occurs, the player should add it to the left of their current civilization mat. Since many civilizations, including the merrymakers, require the player to place player tokens on the civilization itself, it is possible to run out of player tokens. If this happens, use some spare cubes instead. If a player's turn isn't impacted by decisions being made by the previous player, they may proceed to take their turn. One such instance could be during the player's income turn after the Tapestry card has been played. As a reminder, it's important to remember that benefits and landmarks are mandatory rewards, while bonuses are optional. A few elements in the game, such as the level 3 technologies that we mentioned earlier, require the player to keep in mind their neighbors. For the purposes of the game, the neighbors are the players sitting to the immediate left and immediate right of the player. There are 3 achievements found on the board here. When a player earns one of these for the first time, they place a player token in the leftmost cube underneath that achievement. The player then gains the listed number of victory points. A player cannot lose an achievement, and they also cannot gain the same achievement twice. If a player exceeds 100 victory points, they will take this cube and place it on the 100, and then continue counting back at the beginning of the track with an additional cube. If they exceed 200, they will move this cube to 200 and then continue counting back at the beginning of the track with this one. The AI singularity benefit on the technology track may result in a player having multiple player tokens on the same track. Either token is eligible whenever the player is going to advance on that track. However, anytime the player needs to consider the relative position on the track, they should only reference the most advanced of their tokens on that track. Each player's game may end at different times, since each player may reach their 5th income turn at different times. When a player completes their 5th income turn, they then wait for the other players to complete the game. Once all players have taken their 5th income turn, the player with the most victory points is the winner. In the case of a tie, the tied player with the most resources remaining is the winner, and if there is still a tie, the tied players share the victory. So there you go, that's everything you need to know to play Tapestry. Now I will have a separate solo video to explain how to use the Ultima in Tapestry, so be sure to come back and check that out. Also, be sure to, if you want to support the channel, please go over to the Patreon and support us over there. You can also find all kinds of other ways to support us in the description below. And until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.